Well, joining us now to give us more insight on the state of terrorism here in the U.S. is Jason Blazakis, professor at Middlebury Institute of International Studies. Jason, thank you for giving us some of your time. So we know that this suspect, 19-year-old from a small town in Maine, time and time again, we'll hear, people who know a suspect will say that they're surprised. And this one is no different. Neighbors say that he came from a loving family. They say they're stunned by this allegation that he could have been radicalized. Jason, how does something like this happen? And is it more common than we think?
Unfortunately, it's quite common, and there are so many different ways something like this can occur. What we saw from this small town in Maine is replicated all across the country. There is some reporting, for instance, that Bickford suffered a very important family loss about 18 months ago. It's been reported that he lost his father, and that certainly may have been something that contributed to him changing. It must have been devastating for him and his family to lose his father. And it's quite possible in this time period that losing someone so close to you that Bickford became interested in searching for community, and he converted to Islam and became a Muslim. And he found that he had this Muslim community that he thought was under duress. And there are certainly quite a few examples in the world right now where there are mass killings and incarcerations illegally of Muslims in places like China and Myanmar. And we know that he was online reading a lot of content related to those unfortunate events in places like China. The persecution of the Uyghur people is one example. And he may have carried out his attack as some kind of misguided belief that he was doing something for his new Muslim community.
Well, Jason, I want to talk more about the suspect, but first, there's a think tank that tracks online extremism, and it released a report today claiming terror groups were promoting a type of low-tech attack specifically targeting law enforcement in the days leading up to New Year's Eve. Jason, why would terror cells be promoting those specific type of attacks?
So in the post 9/11 era, the United States has become much more of a hardened target for groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda to use their actual operatives to stage attacks against the United States, like we saw during 9/11. And because the United States has become so hardened, just thinking about going through the airport, how many layers of security we have to go through now, it's quite significant. The amount of U.S. intelligence collection on foreign-based groups has also precluded the possibility of these groups carrying out sophisticated attacks like they once did. About 5 years ago, there was an individual within ISIS, a really high-level external operative and propagandist, who actually suggested to people to not travel to Iraq and Syria, but just stay home, grab the closest weapon to you, and carry out attacks in your community. So this is part of a long documented example of these groups trying to inspire and radicalize individuals in Western nations to carry out attacks. So I'm not surprised at all by site intelligence recent reporting. It is really reflective of what we've been seeing over the last 7 to 10 years.
All right, last question for you, and I want to get back to the suspect. We know this 19-year-old was on the FBI's radar weeks before this attack. Was there anything that could have or should have been done to stop him?
Now, in defense of law enforcement, it's extremely difficult in cases like this to prosecute. Bickford, by all accounts, was an individual who said to his mother and his family members that he was interested in joining the Taliban. And the Taliban, pursuant to U.S. law, isn't a designated foreign terrorist organization, which makes it more difficult for the FBI to investigate the activities of the individual unless they have credible plotting by the individual. In this case, there are no reports as of we know of this time that he was plotting a specific attack. And I think in the defense of law enforcement, this was a very difficult case.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We will see what continues to unfold. Okay. Jason, thank you for that.
Thank you, Nichole.